With the market crushed this week and in the wake of the FedEx warning, talk of a global recession ahead, what's the road down the road for luxury collectible watches in particular? Paul Altieri is the founder and CEO of Bob's Watches. He joins us now. Paul, good to see you. We are eager to hear about these tropical Rolex watches. But first, we want to talk about the market as a whole. With this backdrop of inflation and those values soaring in the pandemic, what's the luxury market right now?
Well, you know what? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. You know, the market is actually held up very well, actually very well compared to the stock market. I just watched your reporting on that. But no, the market is alive and doing well.
And Paul, it's interesting because we had a Chrono24, it's a watch trading platform, and they were saying that the recent collapse that we've actually seen in crypto has really had an impact on the watch market. It doesn't sound like you're seeing what they're seeing there in the industry.
You know, they're more European-based. We're more in the U.S., so what's going on there might be slightly different than here. But we did see a pullback immediately back in June, late May and June. But yes, I think crypto had a little bit of an effect. But I think it's the overall sentiment of the economy, jobs, and especially the stock market. I think it has a big influence on the market in general. But the luxury market is a much more stable market than some of the other economies. So we've gotten through it pretty well so far.
So, Paul, I want to ask you about these tropical watches, because usually with collectibles, you think I have to keep it as pristine and perfect as possible. But talk about tropical watches and really the type of models that tend to hold their value and actually get better with some of this age.
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. They're actually not for everybody. But you're right. They are actual brand new watches made maybe 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. And for some reason, moisture and air has gotten into the watch and the dial has turned a tropical color. Maybe it's yellow or blue or light blue, or orange even. And there's a lot of collectors out there, a lot in Asia, in fact, that covet these watches. And they are mostly one-of-a-kind watches. So the market in general is a little bit more it's a lot smaller in general compared to the overall market for these tropical watches. But the media certainly had a good time with this auction. So they covered it very, very well. And we had a lot of bidders registered a bid from around the globe. I think we had 2,000 people registered a bid. And roughly we had about 10 to 15 bids for each watch. So it did very well.
And let's talk about them, because this one on the screen is from 1966, just a bit out of my price range. What did it go for? What makes it so unique?
So that one sold for about $31,000. I think it had 12 or 15 bids total. There were about 8 bidders. It came down to the very end. We had 2 bidders at the very end bidding on it. It's a great looking watch. That dial is supposed to be jet black, shiny black. So for whatever reason, over the decades, over the years, it's turned to this sort of mahogany colored dial. And it's very show-stopping when you wear that at dinner or a cocktail party, and people see that, they want to know what's on your wrist.
Paul, let's talk about the watch that fetched the most. The double red Sea Dweller 1972 went for $60,000. What makes this watch so coveted?
Well, first of all, it's incredibly rare. To begin with, it's a double red Sea Dweller. They only made a limited amount of those watches back then. But also, too, this one's turned to tropical. And of all the watches I've bought and sold over the years, the last 12 years, this is the only one that I've had of this model that's turned tropical. So it's very unusual. And it's in pristine condition.
So, Paul, if there's a unicorn watch out there, the watch that you have your eye on, that you think would fall under this category, that you'd really like to get your hands on, what would it be?
Well, there's a Paul Newman, but unfortunately, it's a little bit out of my price range. It's an all gold, 18 karat gold Paul Newman, and they're selling today at anywhere between $1 million to $1.5 million in good condition. But I'd love to get my hands on an all gold Paul Newman.
All right, Paul Altieri, Bob's Watches, founder and CEO. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great weekend.